When I first started watching Doctor Who, I didn't have any particular intention of watching the spin-offs, mostly because I didn't know they existed. Once I found out, I still wasn't sure if I would be including them or not on the channel, but the moment I met Sarah Jane Smith in School Reunion, I knew I would have to watch the Sarah Jane Adventures. The way they introduced her in that episode, you could just feel the rich history of the character, and I was feeling nostalgia for someone I'd never met before. It was so well done, and I just couldn't help myself. Is it a little bit weird that a grown man's reacting to a child's show? Yeah, sure, maybe. But I have no regrets because I had a great time watching the show. It captured the fun and whimsy of Doctor Who that I absolutely love, but also, surprisingly, especially the farther into the show we got, it truly dealt with some pretty heavy topics, some incredible topics, not only for children growing up, but like maybe a life lesson or two that we can apply to our lives as adults. What I do know is none of it would have been possible without the incredible talents of Elizabeth Sladen. She brings such a charm and sincerity to the role. You just trust her to take care of the entire world. And of course, we know the Sarah Jane Adventures was cut short when she lost her battle to cancer. And yeah, that would be the end of it. But I've heard about this little short here called Farewell Sarah Jane. I don't know a lot about like what it actually is. I believe it's more of like an audio story, so I don't know exactly what this reaction looks like or entails, and what it might be like on the edited version on YouTube that you're likely now watching. I do imagine it will pay tribute not only to Elizabeth Sladen, but to Sarah Jane as a character as well. So it is time to experience Farewell Sarah Jane for the very first time. Not surprising, it's immediately got compelling music. Hey guys. Farewell Sarah Jane, written by Russell T. Davies. I suspected. Would have been disappointing perhaps if it wasn't.
It was a lovely service, and everyone came.
Okay, so it's audio, but we can see the narrator.
So many people. It was a bright, cold spring day, sunlight shining through the tall windows of the reception room. And the guests sat on chairs, and on the floor, and in the corridor, and outside on the lawn. All smiling, all sad. All gathered to remember Sarah Jane. Luke said hello to the soldiers from UNIT, and the Brigadier's daughter gave him the biggest hug. Clyde chatted with a nice couple from Australia, Tegan and Nissa. And then Ben and Polly, who'd come from India. Then Ian and Barbara from Cambridge. And then Martha and Mickey with their son August. A woman called Dodo said...
Martha and Mickey have a son named August?
And Liz Shaw and someone called Victoria, and Sky manifested briefly in her human form. Captain Jack stood at a distance and saluted.
Aww.
And then turned away.
Sky manifested briefly in her human
and her
form?
Dad smiled down from a video screen. They'd missed their plane, too busy chasing a bandrel through Seattle. But they laughed and joked with everyone. And then Maria cried, and her father hugged her. But Rani stood back. She was polite and smiling. She watched everyone and everything, but Rani didn't say much at all. Once the wonderful speeches and glorious songs were done, everyone broke up into little groups. Tall, handsome waiters gave out drinks and sandwiches. The guests told stories and swapped tales. There was laughter and tears. But really, a sense of joy, huge joy, in remembering a life well lived and well loved. There was also a quick little 10 minutes where the tall, handsome waiters turned out to be jackals of the backwards clock, servants of the trickster, who materialized in a blaze of dark light with a plan to swap planet Earth with a vile copy from the septic dimension. But all the guests joined forces to shrink the trickster to the size of a doll and lock him in a treasure chest at the bottom of the Atlantic for the next 1,000 years.
Yeah!
And then the party went on.
10 minutes, that's all it took.
But time passed.
That's how well Sarah Jane trained her team.
They all swapped numbers and promised to meet up every year. They'd call themselves the Family Smith. And then Luke, Clyde and Rani stood by the door to say goodbye to everyone as they left.
Yeah.
First of all, Joe Jones came up to them and said,
Well, my darlings, I'm sorry, but I really do have to run.
Oh,
Wasn't it wonderful? Oh gosh, and I'm really sorry about breaking that vase. You know,
what?
I loved her so much. She really was such a special, special girl.
I love Joe.
And I've been thinking, I know you're all waiting for the doctor to turn up, but come on, he couldn't, could he? I mean, he's
Why
got
not?
2 hearts. Imagine them both breaking. I don't think he could bear it.
That's fair.
Anyway, he's probably off, I don't know, saving some asteroid from
No,
a
he should be
giant
here.
squid or something. Well, that's it. Now I truly, truly have to go. Oh, where's Rio de Janeiro? No, not the city, my granddaughter. Although, if I can't find my glasses, oh gosh, I probably can't find the city either. Anyway, this really has to be goodbye. And remember, I love you all so much.
Even in this format, she gives her all to her performance. I hope that she's in some of the episodes of Classic Who that I'll be watching on my tour.
and off she went. Geeta and Haresh had missed all the business with the trickster because she'd brought sausage rolls for the buffet, but she'd lost the plate and went to the kitchens to
that
cause a
checks
right
out.
old fuss, demanding it back. But now Geeta came up to them and said,
What a lovely day.
Oh,
I couldn't understand half of it. She was a funny woman. I used to get all tense because, well, I thought Haresh fancied her.
what?
But I tell you what about Sarah Jane. She was your best friend. You three. And you were kids back then. You should have been going out, having parties and going into town and hanging around the parks and things. But you stayed. All the time. With her.
They were doing quite... They were
I
okay.
used to think
They weren't bored.
that says something about Sarah Jane Smith.
Yeah.
It says that she was a remarkable. And the street's very quiet without her. Sorry. Bye.
Geeta left. And then Dorothy McShane gave them all a big hug and said,
I just wanted to say something the doctor once said, a long time ago now. We were trapped on this prison planet run by these giant mechanical prawns. And we sat in the dark. And the doctor went all quiet and full of memories, like he sometimes did. And he said, I miss her. Out of all the people in this whole wide universe, I miss Sarah Jane.
It's beautiful.
And then years later, I met her. We had that adventure with the Diamond Wolf clan,
Oh.
and the doctor was right,
I hope I get to meet Dorothy too.
Okay.
I don't think I know her yet.
because I miss her. I will miss Sarah Jane for the rest of my life.
You just instantly love her.
and Dorothy said,
You
goodbye,
can't help it. She's just
taking K9 with her.
so
And
good.
everyone made their farewells until it was just Luke,
She
Clyde,
took
and
K9.
Marnie, the old gang. And they talked about Sarah Jane. And Clyde said,
She was alright.
and they laughed. But then he said,
I could have been nothing. You know, just one of those boys, bad at school, full of terrible jokes, too cheeky for his own good, just scribbling silly cartoons, but it's like Sarah Jane looked through the crowd and she saw me.
Wow.
She saw what I could be.
Plus, you were nosy.
And I wish I told her how much I loved her, because I did. I loved her with my whole heart. How lucky were we to have found her, eh? She was the best. The absolute best.
Then Luke drove them back to Bannerman Road, and they talked about the terrible day they'd heard the news. Luke and Clyde both agreed. They'd all been out of the country at the time, Luke with UNIT in Geneva, Clyde as a guest of honour at the New York Comic-Con, Rani at the North Pole reporting on Project Refreeze. So it felt like Sarah Jane had waited until they were out of sight to save them any pain. That's what Luke and Clyde said. But Rani sat in the back, still not saying much at all. They arrived on Bannerman Road and went into number 13, remembering so many things that had happened in that house.
Home sweet home.
So
man.
many amazing days, so much terror, and so many laughs. And then they went upstairs to say goodbye to Mr. Smith. The attic was the same as ever, perhaps just a little dust beginning to settle. They called for Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith's voice was as calm and as formal as ever, though even a supercomputer couldn't hide the sadness behind the words. Sarah Jane had left instructions. She had said that Bannerman Road should close down. Mr. Smith should be folded away in secret, and the house left to grow dark, waiting. That's what Sarah Jane had said.
But
Waiting for the next one, waiting for its new owner, waiting for the stories to begin all over again.
oh,
And then when all was said and done, they simply had to go. Luke had equations to solve, Clyde had meetings about his Silver Bullet movie, and Rani was due to publish a scoop which would bring down the government. But they'd see each other on Christmas Day, like they always did.
good.
The best of friends forever. And then Luke said,
I was so lucky because I had the best mother in the entire universe. And that is a literal fact. She showed me the whole wide world. And I don't mean all the monsters and invasions and people made of smoke and vegetables. I mean the real world. She's the one who told me that Sanjay was looking at me in that way. And she's the one who told me to go and talk to him. And now we've been married for 5 years. That's the greatest gift she ever gave me. I may have been created by the Bane, but Mum, she gave me life.
the other two smiled, and Luke hugged Clyde and then Rani.
His
and the boys
performance,
headed
ding.
Rani looked around. She tidied a few stray books. She turned off one light, then another. Then she put Mr. Smith into his close-down sequence. And as the timer ticked away, before Mr. Smith folded himself into the dark, Rani stood in the doorway. And she thought. And then Rani said,
You know what I think?
Wow.
I think it's not over. Because I don't think she's dead. I really don't. That's not just me being mad. Because I honestly think, in my heart and soul, that he came back for her. Right at the end, the doctor came back for his Sarah Jane. And he said, should we go? Out into the stars? One last trip? And she said, oh yes, please. And I think they're out there now. Sarah Jane and the doctor in the TARDIS, travelling through space and time forever in a story that never ends. That's what I think. What about you?
Yes, Rani. I think so too.
Goodbye, Mr. Smith.
Then Rani closed the door
That was
and
so
walked
good.
downstairs, went outside, locked the front door, and walked away. But it's still there. The house on Bannerman Road. Just waiting.
I like the idea that, the adventures could start up again. I kind of feel like Mr. Smith maybe deserves a little more than I mean, he's a Zylock. He's not just a computer, but he'll be a big help probably to the next generation. This was really beautiful. In loving memory of Elizabeth Slater, our Sarah Jane. All throughout that, I mean, first of all, you could tell how much this meant to every person who contributed their voice and face. I mean, they all were in their feels a bit. Revisiting this time in their lives was probably very special, very emotional for them. And I absolutely love. True or not, I'll leave that to you, but I love the idea that the Doctor came back for Sarah Jane Smith. I mean, every interaction I've seen, and most of you likely know, or if you don't, by the way, I'm going to be starting a tour of Classic Who very, very soon. I'm going to be having at least one stop for each of the Doctors, and I'm very excited to experience that. And there'll be a couple of specials mixed in there as well, leading up to and coinciding with the 50th anniversary specials. But they're just, every interaction I've seen the Doctor have with Sarah Jane always felt special. And I'm sure that the Doctor has, a lot of companions that are special. Certainly some of the ones that I've seen fall into that category, and for one reason or another. But I think there's always going to be those that stand out. I think there's always going to be those that just stay with him in his heart, for a lack of a better term, if you don't mind me being a little sentimental. And yes, for the most part, the Doctor moves forward and doesn't look back, despite the 10th Doctor really being able to take his time and look back over all of them. I think that the idea that maybe, just maybe, whether it was the 11th Doctor, 12th Doctor, 22nd Doctor, just maybe, he came back one last time for Sarah Jane Smith. I love that idea. This was so, honestly, and maybe it shouldn't be surprising, but it was so well done. I'm not really surprised. I expected it to be great, but I didn't expect it to be quite that emotional for me. I am certain. I mean, I just met Sarah Jane, in the last year or two. I imagine for those who grew up with her, one, either watching Classic Who, or two, if the Sarah Jane Adventures was your childhood. I imagine for you, this hits so much harder than it does even for me. But I'm so glad that I got to experience it with you. Not just Farewell Sarah Jane, but the entirety of this show. And I want to thank you for being a part of my Sarah Jane Adventures journey. I hope you'll continue to be a part of my journey as I continue through Doctor Who. I mean, the Doctor Who in the universe has truly become one of my all-time favorite shows, and I'm just so grateful that I get to experience it with you. And yeah, thank you for being here to share it. I'm sure there will be many more adventures to come, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.